to see you, mate. How you doing? Good to see you. Back together again.
Yes. Oh, excuse me. Just in the press conference. Put these things on. Just sitting in the press conference.
If a question is asked in French, you'll have the simultaneous translation in your... Yes.
Like the UN.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, yourself. Same here. Photographers will operate for an extra few minutes, and then we'll start the press conference. That's okay with you guys? Please, all of you, use this time to turn your cell phones off. That includes you. And whatever beepers, whatever you have. And if you have to shoot during the press conference, please do so without using your flashlights, because it interferes with the television crew's work. Thank you. Why did I say it in English? Bonjour à tous, hello everyone, et bienvenue à la conférence de presse de I, Daniel.
So welcome to the press conference on I, Daniel Blake.
The people who are here at this table with us today. In the title role as Daniel Blake, Mr. Dave Johns. As Katie, Miss Hayley Squires. At my far end, far left, this is the first time that you work with Mr. Ken Loach, at least, I think.
Third time.
What? I said third.
Oh, did you? Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So it was Angel's Chair and Jimmy's Hall and this one.
Thank you, yeah.
Cinematographer, Mr. Robbie Ryan. And the Can Dream Team, writer Paul Laverty, producer Rebecca O'Brien, director Ken Loach. And no offense to the Dream Team, I'll throw the first question to the two of you actors. Where have you been all of our film goers' lives? Where do you come from? What?
Well, I'm a stand-up comedian, so I've been, going around comedy clubs in obscurity, which is, so being something like this has been an amazing experience, yeah. So that's what I've been doing.
Where have I been? I've been out of drama school for 6 years and attempting to act when people give me a job and writing. But yeah, slowly.
How did you hook up with this project, with Mr. Loach, with Rebecca O'Brien, with Paul Laverty? How did this happen?
Well, for me personally, I got a text from a friend who's a producer, said that Ken was looking for somebody around my age from Newcastle, so you should send in your sort of details. And I was just, I thought, oh, should I? And then I thought, yeah. So I just sent the link to my web page, my comedy page, and then they asked me to come in and have a chat with Ken, and here I am now.
The rest is history.
Yeah, this is it, yeah, so it's amazing, yeah. And that's how it happened to me, yeah.
I got a call from my agent to say, would you like to go and meet Ken Loach? I went, oh yeah, all right then. And went along and just had a 10-15 minute chat with Ken and our casting director Colleen, just about life and where I'm from and my history and my parents, and we just had a chat. And then, came back in 2 more times. And the second time I met Dave, and we did some...
We fell in love.
We fell in love, and the rest is no. And we did some improvised conversations that Ken gave us, and then we got back together again in Newcastle, where I met Paul and Rebecca, and that was the kind of final round of getting the job. Thank you.
So lucky to find them.
I would tend to assume, Mr. Loach, that casting a cinematographer is just as important as casting the actors.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
You may blush.
It's finding the right tone for a film is really important. And I think for this one, we felt the story was so strong that we had to be very simple and very clear and very economical, and that it didn't need any embellishment. So Robbie and I, and Robbie had worked with us before, and we talked about finding a style that was absolutely clear and plain and unadorned, and without any extraneous movement or anything to distract you from capturing the essence of the people in front of the camera and describing their situation with economy and simplicity. So that's the work that Robbie and I... There's a quotation from Bertolt Brecht that I think is very good and has guided us on more than one occasion. And he wrote it in English, that the words are, and I always thought the simplest of words must suffice. When I say what things are like, it will break the hearts of all. And I think that's what we tried to do, was to say what things are like, because it not only breaks your heart, but it should make you angry.
Question over here.
Kate Muir from The Times of London. Wonderful film. I wanted to ask you, 50 years ago you made Cathy Come Home for the BBC, a play about homelessness. And it was described at the time as an ice pick to the head of anyone who saw it. Now, I think this is another ice pick to the head of anyone who sees it. Are you shocked to be making a film in a similar vein 50 years on?
Yes, I think it is shocking. And I think it's shocking because it's not an issue just for people in our country. It's throughout Europe. And there is a conscious cruelty in the way we're organising our lives now, where the most vulnerable people are told that their poverty is their own fault. If you have no work, it's your fault you haven't got a job. Never mind that in Britain and there's mass unemployment throughout Europe, and in Britain there are nearly 2 million known unemployed, but in reality there's nearer 4 million. And the most vulnerable people are caught. Disabled people are caught. The increase in suicides is marked by, in fact, people in the places where these assessments take place, some workers there have been given instruction on how to deal with potential suicides. So they know this is going on. And it's not just a few, it's tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands, and across Europe, it's massive. So it is deeply shocking that this is happening at the heart of our world. But the people's response, and this is what we found, the people's response is very human. There can be a comedy to it. There can be a kind of deep frustration, pain, despair, and survival sometimes. So it draws out all the human emotions, but the heart of it is a shocking, shocking policy.
Could I just add something to that as well, which I think is really important, because one of the biggest questions that we talked about at the very beginning, like who would be the main characters and how we would pitch this story, because after travelling the country, you know, in Scotland and all the way down to England, travelling around food banks, listening to people's stories, working to welfare rights organisations, disabled groups, what was remarkable was how many of the most vulnerable people were the ones who bore the brunt of it. Now, in this particular story, Dan is actually a very competent man who has a life of work, you know, who's got friends, who's smart, intelligent. He's had a very, very full life. But what really amazed us was talking to experts in different sections of the community, people who work with mental health. The stories we heard about that were just break your heart. The people who are disabled, again, they've suffered 6 times more from the cuts than anyone else. And there was a remarkable phrase by one of the civil servants we heard, who talked about the cuts, and he said, low-lying fruit. In other words, the easy targets. So this story could have been much harsher. It could have been somebody with mental health difficulties. But we actually pitched it so there are actually 2 very competent, smart people who are the main characters. But I mean, we could have told this story from someone who is much more vulnerable, much more heartbreaking. And I think, Ken, is very important to remember too, is the systematic nature of it. And what really touched us as well was talking to whistleblowers, people who worked inside the DWP, the Department of Work and Pensions. And many people who had worked there there's several people that we met, and they spoke to us anonymously. And they said they were humiliated how they were forced to treat the public. So there's nothing accidental about it, and it's affecting a huge section of the population.
I think also what it is what shocked me about when I got the part was that things like sanctions, which, you know, I haven't been employed for a lot of years because I'm a stand-up comic, but to think that somebody could lose the benefit just because they were late, you know, and can lose it for like a long time and doesn't have any money to buy food. And that was shocking to me that would happen, you know. It's like saying, you know, we'll punish you and we'll sicken you so that you sort of give up. That's how I felt, you know. And if they do take a job, it'll be for zero, if there's any jobs around there, it'll be for 0 hour contracts. And it's just, it was shocking to me that's what it was for me, yeah.
Question over there.
Hello, it's Jack Morvan, also from the Times. There are others here. When the screening last night had subtitles on it in English as well as in French, which is quite amusing.
Is that because I'm a Geordie?
Yes, I think it is. But was that your decision? Is that going to happen to the film? And do you think that says something? Do we think that the wider world only understands received pronunciation?
Can I just say that the reason we have subtitles is purely for the international market. It's not for the British. We won't be having subtitles in the UK. It's purely because the screenings here are seen by people for whom neither French nor English is their first language, and so to tune into the accents is much harder for them. So it's simply to help the audience in Cannes.
Okay, question over here.
Rodrigo Fonseca from TV Globo Brasil. Question to Mr. Loach, wonderful film. Mr. Loach, could you please explain us the way you direct your cast, the professional and the non-professional actors, and how do you rehearse, how do you open space for improvisation while you are shooting them?
Questions.
Yeah.
That's a very good question.
Yeah. Well, it's... oh, damn, I've dropped my thing now.
Hang on, I'll get it. I might be gone sometime.
I
just realised what I'd said. There'll be people to be envious.
Yeah, there will, yeah.
I've got stories to tell now, Ken.
Now we know how you get the job, you know?
You can see I'm technically incompetent here. Well, it's really very easy working with actors. because they are full of imagination and full of vulnerability. And I think what we just try to do is to start at the beginning and go through the story, shoot it in order so that the story unfolds, and the actors get the script, bit by bit. It should have a sense of being improvised, but the script is very precisely written. And when you go back and look at the finished film and look at the script and the screenplay, they're almost identical. But it should feel as though it's happened in the moment and it's taken people by surprise. But it's really not complicated, and everybody is, the people working in the food bank, for example, were people who worked in food banks in the old Italian neorealist tradition, so that they were people who knew the job. The people who were working in the office, where they went to sign on, were people who had worked in that office. So we tried to create a sense of reality, but then the actors, are people of great imagination and great capacity to make that moment live. And it's the capacity to make the moment live in a way that you will care about or be amused by or whatever. That is the trick. But I guess Hayley and Dave know the reality better than me, really.
Yeah, I think it was. I think for me it was a case that when you get the script a little bit of a time, you actually live the life of the person, because in life you don't know what's going to happen the next day and the next day. So that was the surprise, that you would get a bit of script and go, oh, right, that's what happened, okay. And that was sort of how I felt, that it was like we were going on that journey with Dan, and I felt that's how I felt anyway, that I was living his life,
Yeah, and that works. I mean, that works. It worked so well because, I mean, the main thing you have when you go on set with Ken is the fact that there's a calmness, and prior to starting shooting the film, you spent time together, be it through research or conversation or lunch or whatever it is. You spent time together, and what Dave and I found is that when we step onto set, because of how long they've all been working with each other, there's a family element to it, and there's a calmness, and there's a sort of, you walk in knowing that it's like stepping onto a platform that is completely safe. And so you may be taken through with little sections of the script, or you don't know what's going to happen the next day to your character, but because you're with Ken, and B, you're with his team, who are just the most supportive group of people, and you're stepping onto a platform that is never going to collapse. So you're guided. It could be another case, you could work with a different director or a different team, and you step on, you go, oh, I'm not sure about this, why don't I know what's happening? I need to know what's going to happen when I've got a call time. Well, we didn't get call times, but I know I'm in here and I want to know what's going to happen. Whereas we didn't even, towards the end we shook a little bit, didn't we?
Yeah, well, it was the first film I've ever made. I mean, I've never done anything like this before, so I had to learn sort of. I mean, I remember Robbie used to bring the light monitor up to me, and I used to keep looking at it, and he goes, what are you looking at that for? And I goes, I don't know what it is. So, I had to sort of, so that was for me, it was a safe place for me, because I didn't feel intimidated by the whole thing of making a film, I felt safe, and that's this man here, because he just makes you feel calm,
You just know how, no matter how kind of rocky it gets, or how sort of, the more traumatic the next thing that happens, that it's not going to collapse, I suppose is the point. You're not going to get chucked out of the boat. So you can keep going, and the more, particularly with a story like this, the more you keep going, the more you're able to draw out of it to keep telling the important stories that are in there.
And what was a nice thing to see was the way you got to know the children, because that was very important, the two kids. And it was lovely to see how you really got to know the kids.
Yeah, it felt like I just met these two kids. There was a girl who was in trouble, and that did feel real, did.
Question over there.
Hi, Ben Lee from The Guardian. Ken, last year you said that you felt that Jeremy Corbyn wasn't using his position enough to speak about the issues raised in this film. Do you think in the last 6 months he's spoken out about it more, his stance has improved?
I think, sorry, we're talking British politics, but I think there is a common denominator between all the European countries, so I'll try to generalise it a little bit, if I may. I think Corbyn is the best news that's happened to the Labour Party since Clement Attlee, since the end of the Second World War. I think for once there is a leadership of Corbyn and one or two of his allies who understand the interests of working class people. Yeah. And then under Blair and Brown, they only understood the interests of business. And now they understand the interests of ordinary people. But the problem, and he speaks out, the problem is that the rest of the party in Parliament want him out, or a lot of them, and that's the problem he faces. And I think it's the case throughout Europe is that you will find leaders, not necessarily in the old social democratic parties. There are people who understand what is happening, but the political structures are not good at allowing them to be heard. So I think that's the problem. I think Corbyn and his friends and his allies could do a great job, but we've really got to let them be heard, and we've got to make alliances across France, Spain, Greece, wherever, so that there is a real left in Europe that understands what is happening and doesn't put the interest of big business first, rejects the EU when it sets out to privatise everything, or do deals with America that is going to prioritise the interest of big business and give them separate courts to undermine our governments and when they seek not to privatise. So I think we need a European-wide movement that will rescue people like Dan and Katie from the situation they're in.
Question here.
Peter Howell from the Toronto Star in Canada. Congratulations on a lovely film. I have a question for Ken Loach, but anyone who else wants to weigh in. Sorry?
Did you say lovely film?
Lovely film.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Not a word I would have used.
No, you talked about tone earlier on. I was hoping you could expand on that, finding the right tone. There's many nice comic touches. Now, did you find that you had to struggle between putting too many in or not enough, or was it a very natural way that it all worked together?
I think it begins in the writing, and I think often people write stories about people who are suffering, and they're miserable all the time. That's not the case. You know, you go to the food banks or wherever, and there's laughter, there's comedy, there's stupidity, and there's silliness and warmth, absolutely. And that's the reality of people's lives, isn't it? So if you cut out that sense of humour and warmth, well, you miss the point. That's how people are. But it begins in the writing and it continues in the playing.
Yeah, second that, yeah.
Question over there.
I'm Darbaz Hussain from Ruda Media Network. We are coming in Kurdistan of Iraq. I have one question. Now many things are happening in Middle East, especially in Kurdistan. You have any plan to make a move, to get script, to get scenario in the refugees of Kurdistan about the Kurdish refugees in the world? What do you have a plan to do something about that? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your question. And when you read stories and watch the coverage of refugees, I mean, I think you'd have to have a heart of stone, you know, not to be touched deeply by it. I mean, it's one of immense tragedy. And I suppose what is infuriating to many people who watch it is how the West has washed its hands of its responsibility for what it has done in Iraq and beyond. We've pulverised that place. We've smashed Fallujah to pieces. We've pissed on international law, and we've been hypocrites, and then we pretend to rise above it with the moral high ground. So I think anyone who watches that, can see that it's a very, very important subject. But that is a big political question with enormous consequences. But when you come to do a story, I mean, a good theme or a good subject doesn't make necessarily for a good script. I mean, it depends on how you find your way into it, the premise, the characters. And to do a story like that, which I would love to see in Cannes in the years to come, you'd have to have a writer who would understand the history, the language, the culture, the subtleties, who would understand the poetry, could find these very, very poignant moments. And certainly I couldn't do it. And I think what we would really need to see is brilliant Kurdistan writers and directors doing it, because they would understand the nuances, they would catch the levels, and they would be able to communicate that in a way much better than I certainly could.
Did you want to add something?
No, I think you're right. Yeah, I think that's. I think to have the stories from the place where they're from, if the people who are in that position can write a story and can film it, I think that's where it needs to come from, because like Paul said, the heart of the situation. We watch it as on the news, and we can feel as human beings the tragedy and the sort of the wrongdoing of it all. But I think for the story to be real, it has to come from the people, really.
I think I absolutely agree with what Paul said, and thank you for the question. I think I would add one thing. I think it would be no bad thing for the European filmed community, producers, EU media funds, whatever, to fund films in countries where there's difficulty to get films made. Europe could take the initiative in seeking filmmakers in your country and in other countries in a similar position, where we can use cinema to know the situation, to share the good things and the bad things through stories. So I think there can be, in a sense, there's a responsibility from Europe, because Europe has created so much havoc, or at least our part of it has, that we should help the film industry in your country.
Considering the tone that this press conference is taking, I don't think it was that easy to have this film financed, Rebecca?
Well, we're very lucky in that we've had some terrific European support over the last few years, particularly with our French partners, Why Not and Wild Bunch. And the thing about this one, which is unusual, is that we decided to make it very quickly. I think I got the first draft of the script literally this time last year. Paul and Ken got into research only 6 months before that. And when I read it, I thought, we've really got to make this straight away, because this is so current, it's such an important story to tell. But of course, and then I thought we must make it this year, straight, in 2015. And so I quickly went to BBC and BFI just to see if they had any money left for the year. And the only difficulty was that people were really keen to fund it, but in a hurry, that was a bit more difficult. But they did step up to the plate, and it actually wasn't that difficult to get it funded. People came on board quickly, and we kept it very tight, and we wanted to tell the story within a very small area in a milieu that was on a landscape that was identifiably one place, and so it came together very quickly. Once we decided to do it in Newcastle, it just almost made itself. It sort of, the places arrived, and the locations were found, and obviously with the help of our terrific team, but it came together easily because it was a story that needed to be told quickly, and so everybody became behind it quickly. So it wasn't that difficult.
Why Newcastle, if I may ask?
It's a great city. It's got a history of a long tradition of working class struggle in the shipyards and the mines nearby. It's got a terrific identity. There's a great sense of humour there. It's one of those cities like Liverpool, Glasgow, Manchester, where you can identify it absolutely. And that richness of that culture is a great, it's It's a great background to work from. It gives you so much energy.
Question over here.
Hi there. Fikra Gibbons from AFP. Congratulations, first of all. I hope you're happy. You made a lot of people cry last night. It's a question to Ken and to Rebecca. Just picking up on a point you made about Europe earlier, do you think it would be the people who are that lower third in Britain who are caught now, they would be better out of Europe? Or do you think if Britain goes its own way in the Brexit vote in June, that the kind of neoliberal experiment that's going on in Britain will just get worse? And for Rebecca, whether if Britain does pull out, how will it affect filmmaking like yours?
I think it's a huge question. I mean, I guess everyone knows we have this big vote in a few weeks' time as whether we leave the European Union or not. I think it's a very difficult question because on the one hand, the European Union is a neoliberal project, a drive towards privatization, a drive to deregulation. The safeguards that are there for workers and for the environment are constantly under attack. So it's not doing us any favors at the moment. On the other hand, if we leave, we know the individual governments will be moving to the right as far as possible, again deregulating even further, cutting labour protection for workers, destroying the environment even faster, putting the interests of big business to the fore. I mean, we're faced with a far-right government if we leave. The question is, to me, the question is, how do we fight that best? Do we fight it best from within, where we link up with other European left groups, or do we fight it better from without? It's almost a tactical question. The EU as it stands is a neoliberal project. How do we fight it best, from within or without? I think on balance, we fight it better from within, and we make alliances with other European left movements. But it's a dangerous moment.
I feel quite strongly that the film community and the way that the European film community can work together and does work together in terms of co-productions and building films together is a really good example of how Europe can work. And I think that, as Ken says, fighting from within is possibly the best way to change things. But I think the cultural example that co-production in Europe gives us is what we should be following. And I just think that there is a British tendency to look to look across the Atlantic to make films, and that seems to be a money-driven operation. Whereas when we stay within Europe, cultural stories, important stories like our own can be told, and I think to lose that would be a tragedy.
Yes, well, I think the question connects up actually with welfare, because my fear is if every country goes alone, it could be a race to the bottom. It will be a huge effort to try and attract international capital, and the one way you do that is reduce taxes. If you reduce taxes, you reduce all the things that make life human. And I think, interestingly enough, I think our story taps right into this, because the big question is, why is this happening to Kate and to Dave and to Dan in the film? Why are we picking on the poorest and the most vulnerable? Why are we sanctioning people with mental health difficulties? Why are we making disabled people suffer 6 times more than everyone else? And what is remarkable is, round and about all of this is the most amazing propaganda campaign to denigrate everyone on welfare. And what's really, really remarkable, and this attracted our attention right from the very, very beginning, and I had Ken and myself talked about this, many, many times, was the public perception of people on welfare. Ordinary people think that 30% of the welfare budget is fraudulent, okay? The real figure is 0.75%, and it's absolutely dwarfed by hundreds of times by the tax not paid. So the question is, why are we picking on our most vulnerable people? And I think it's a question, it goes way back to what happened again, and someone said, we mentioned Dickens and the poorhouse. If you keep people frightened and poor and nervous and jumping hoops, You know, they'll accept any job, and many of them are accepting terrible zero-hour contracts, and we could give you tons of stories of the chaos it created in people's lives. And also people who got into work were not joining trade unions. And even the people inside the DWP, they were very aware if they joined their trade union or became a spokesperson for their trade union, they would not be promoted. So there's a whole project of fear and punishment. But what is absolutely fascinating is, again, when we talk to people who were on welfare, and they felt so furious and so angry and so frustrated that they were being accused of being chancers and you know, all those terrible insults that they have, scroungers, when most of them were actually just fighting for their dignity and their rights. And that was a thing that we saw again and again and again. They were just so furious that they were being accused in the public by so many televisions and newspaper programmes as if they were wasters because they were on welfare.
I can only speak from my family's point of view, but my dad, he was, as I said, he was a joiner, and you know, we lived in a council house, and he brought up 2 kids. And I think a big problem in the country is the selling off of the social housing. That people have no chance of getting onto a council house, and if they do, they have to, if they make a little bit sort of like of themselves, they have to give the council house up. And my father had the council house all the time, and we lived on a council estate, and what's happened now is all the council estates have become half private, and then the money never goes back into building new social housing. It just goes on to you know, to private landlords, and I think that's that people can't find a place to live, and then they're stuck, and then we get homelessness, and you know, and I find it the same with Paul said, people who are on benefits, who are like you say, believe that it's their fault, and that the scroungers and you know, programs like Benefit Street doesn't help, because that shows them as you know, they're playing the system, you know, and I think that's the problem. They don't have a voice, and they're the easiest people to pick on, you know. I think that's how I felt, you know.
Just before we move on, sorry, I know the answer to the question's got quite big now, but just what Paul was saying about the propaganda that's kind of surrounding the answer to anything that comes up, be it the exit from the EU or anything. It's something that I was talking to my mum about this morning, because my mum lives in social housing, and what we were talking about, what you were saying of normal people, as we call them, are led to believe that this amount of people are on benefits and therefore are scroungers, and this amount of people are going to work to pay so that they can live, and they can live like that, and they can scrounge. And what's really, really clever by the government, by the press, is that they've managed to, if we call it the working class, they've managed to kind of get inside it and segregate people. So you have people that are unable to go to work and people that do go to work, and they're pointing fingers at each other, saying that I pay for you to live. You've got what I should have. And so the mega rich and the people that are actually stealing from these people, tax cuts, all the rest of it, they're being ignored because they don't draw attention to it. And they point the finger in a different direction, so your distraction is over there. So it's kind of like they've got into the working class, as we would call it, and they've segregated people. So they've left us to argue amongst ourselves, so that they can get on doing what they do and keep people down there, fighting amongst themselves and tearing each other apart.
It's how the far right rises, isn't it? It's how the far right rises.
Question here.
Hi there, Mr. Loach. Sam Crichton from the Daily Mail. A stunningly powerful film, made more so by the performances, particularly with Hayley. I wouldn't be surprised if you win a slew of awards from this portrayal. Do you think we're looking at perhaps one of the great stars of British film to come? And secondly, it's been...
Yeah, do you?
We don't know. And secondly, comparisons have been made already to Cathy Come Home sort of 50 years ago, and that sort of seminal moment early in your career. And in some ways, it's felt like a very impressive swan song. I mean, could this be your last film, or is there more to come?
Oh, God. I don't know about that. I don't know. It's...
He'll be making films forever and ever and ever and ever.
No, I don't know about that. It's kind of you to say that. I agree with what you say about Hayley and Dave, of course. Dead right.
On that note, I'm afraid our time is up. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here.